I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth.
So The Handmaid's Tale may have wrapped up its 6th season, but the story isn't stopping there. Hulu isn't about to let Margaret Atwood's chilling world fade away just yet. The big thing on the horizon is The Testaments, and if you're a fan of the original show, you're probably already wondering how it's going to connect. But here's the thing. There's one big change coming, and it's tied to a main character's storyline. We'll get to that a little later, but first, let's go over what we actually know about this new chapter. The next step in the saga is an adaptation of Atwood's 2019 sequel novel, The Testaments. Production has officially kicked off, so the wheels are turning. This sequel was first announced about 6 years ago, just after the book hit shelves, and it's set to pull us right back into Gilead. The difference this time is that it's going to take place after the events of The Handmaid's Tale, and the focus is shifting to 3 women: Aunt Lydia, Agnes, who is June's daughter Hannah, and Daisy. Their lives get tangled together as they uncover Gilead's darkest secrets and the growing rebellion against it. According to Hulu, for these younger women, Gilead is the only life they've ever known. They don't remember the world from before, not really, so everything they believe has been shaped by the system. But when they're faced with the prospect of being married off and living a life of complete servitude, they start searching for allies, both new and familiar, in a fight for their freedom and for the life they deserve. So, if you've been asking yourself, what's next after the Handmaid's Tale's finale? Here's the answer, and a bunch of details about when you might actually get to see it. When is The Testaments coming out? Well, production only started on April 7th, which means you probably shouldn't expect it anytime soon. A realistic guess would be somewhere in the middle or end of 2026. But honestly, looking at the gap between past seasons of The Handmaid's Tale, it was 2.5 years between seasons 5 and 6. It could even end up being 2027 before it hits screens. For now, if you're in the UK, you can still watch The Handmaid's Tale on Channel 4 or Prime Video, and in the US it's streaming on Hulu. Who's coming back for The Testaments? Ann Dowd is back as Aunt Lydia, which feels right since she's one of the most complicated and fascinating characters in the whole series. She's joined by Chase Infinity as Agnes, aka Hannah, June and Luke's biological daughter, and Lucy Halliday as Daisy, who's actually Nicole, June and Nick's daughter. And the cast list doesn't stop there. You've got Rowan Blanchard as Shunammite, who comes from an important Gilead family and enjoys a certain level of respect among her peers. Then there's Matea Conforti as Becca, a girl from more humble beginnings who's starting to question the future Gilead has planned for her. Mabel Lee plays Aunt Vidala, a strict disciplinarian being groomed to lead the women's side of Gilead's rule. Amy Seimetz is Paula, whose recent marriage to a high-ranking commander boosted her social status, though her new life gets complicated by her stepdaughter. And then there's Brad Alexander as Garth, a young commander who finds himself tangled up in the lives of the girls he's meant to protect. The list keeps going. Zarin Darnell Martin is Aunt Gabbana, a hardline believer in Gilead's rules and a close ally to Aunt Vidala. Ava Foote plays Aunt Este, the youngest aunt who's a little more approachable and kind, basically the cool aunt in a sea of strict authority. Isolde Ardies is Hulda, an optimistic girl eager for womanhood, while Shechina Mimpulwana plays Jehosheba, a competitive classmate gunning for a high-status marriage. Burva Pandya is Miriam, who's feeling the pressure of marriage season, and Kira Gulowan plays Rosa, a Martha who's a motherly figure to Agnes. Will Elisabeth Moss be back as June? She is definitely still involved. She's an executive producer on the series, but whether she'll actually appear on screen again is still up in the air. There's been talk that the showrunners hope she'll return, but nothing's confirmed. Until then, it's a wait-and-see situation. So what's The Testaments actually about? Well, in the book, the story picks up 15 years after The Handmaid's Tale, but in the TV version, Ann Dowd has said it's going to be more like 4 to 5 years later. The focus shifts to 3 main characters, Aunt Lydia, Daisy, and Agnes. Showrunner Bruce Miller has explained that while The Handmaid's Tale was about a woman at the absolute bottom of Gilead's hierarchy fighting to survive, The Testaments is also about women who, on the surface, seem to be near the top, and how even they aren't truly safe. For example, Agnes is the daughter of a high-ranking commander, and while she's technically privileged, she's still living in an oppressive, dangerous system. It turns out being at the top in a misogynistic society doesn't mean you're free. It just means you're a bigger target. In another interview, Miller described it as growing up in Gilead. These girls may be cherished and protected in theory, but they're still walking a fine line. Hannah or Agnes starts to feel her mother's rebellious spirit coming through, and that's where things start to heat up. Through her, we see parts of June that can't be suppressed, which actually makes us understand June's character even more. And then there's Aunt Lydia. She's not officially part of the rebellion, but she's quietly working against Gilead from the inside. Miller has hinted that her grip on power is slipping, not because someone's taking it away, but because she's starting to question whether the control she's exercised is morally right. Lydia's the kind of person who, when pushed down, doesn't just give up, she fights back harder. That's exactly where we'll find her in the Testaments. That said, how does The Handmaid's Tale lead into the Testaments? Well, I think one big connection is Hannah. In the Testaments, she's still in Gilead when the story begins, so The Handmaid's Tale made a deliberate choice to keep her separate from June in the final season. If they'd reunited, it would have been harder to set up the sequel storyline. For June, this separation is painful, but it also serves a purpose. She's still out there fighting, trying to get her daughter back. Miller has talked about the beauty in the show's ending, that it shows how many people are risking everything to reunite families and dismantle Gilead. The Testaments will expand on that, showing rebellions happening in all sorts of places, not just around June. Now, remember that big change I mentioned earlier? It has to do with Nicole, or Daisy, as she's called in the book. Here's where the TV version is already different. In the Testaments novel, Gilead still controls Boston, and Nicole is being raised in Toronto by Mayday operatives under an alias. After her adoptive parents are killed, she learns her true identity and is sent into Gilead on a dangerous mission that eventually reunites her with Agnes. But The Handmaid's Tale Season 6 left Nicole in a completely different place, with Holly, June's mother, heading to a newly liberated Boston. This changes the starting point for her character entirely. The casting announcements for the Testaments also gave away Nicole's identity right away. In the book, the Daisy alias was a secret, but in the show, they're not bothering to hide it. That means the TV series probably won't be leaning into that mystery plotline. So, how will it work now? Well, because the Testaments was being developed alongside The Handmaid's Tale, it's likely the writers have already figured out how to adapt the story to this new setup. One possibility is that something happens to Holly, and Nicole ends up under the care of Mayday operatives after all. They could still use the Daisy name for safety, even if she already knows who she really is. There's also another wrinkle: Nicole's biological father, Nick Blaine. In Season 6, Nick boards a doomed flight after siding with Gilead. He leaves behind his pregnant wife Rose, who's already resentful of June. If Nick dies, Rose might have every reason to target Nicole in the sequel, which could add a personal layer of danger to her storyline. All of this means that while the Testaments will follow the same basic idea of these three women's lives intersecting and leading to Gilead's downfall, the TV version is going to arrive there in a very different way than the book did. And that's kind of the exciting part. Even if you've read the novel, you won't know exactly what's coming next. The foundations are familiar, but the path is changing. Which means for fans, there's still plenty to be surprised by when the Testaments finally lands. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay in the loop. And if you want, you can share your thoughts about this video in the comments section.